A week ago, around 10:30 in the morning Central Time, that's when we saw the first round of hostages being returned back to their families. Never in our lifetime would we imagine such a scene. Again, it's the human condition, the tears of joy, the tears of relief, and also the tears of cruelty. We especially look at the children, and we try to process what they experienced in the 45 to 51 days that they were held captive against their will. And then we also think about the families of the remaining hostages that were not part of the first 7 days. So regarding the kids, I've heard many pediatricians, many psychologists say that for the most part, young kids are resilient, that they'll, B'ezrat Hashem, God willing, find a way to live with their trauma, and they will able to live life. And their experience will be different than those who are much older, and we know this from the Holocaust. But during the Holocaust, especially after it, many theologians, they wondered where was God during the most difficult days of Jewish history then. And we have eyewitnesses' accounts that especially in Auschwitz, we have testimony from women that the way women treated one another, giving them their extra rations, an extra blanket, some type of maternal love. And they said it was at this moment when they were able to experience Shekhinah, God's presence within them during this, sometimes we don't have the English words, this horrid environment. And I know most of us are struggling with this theological notion as to where was God on October 7th and where is God now? And for those who've been following the news, and I know so many of us have, many of us saw the picture of Emily Hand being returned back to her father. For those who don't remember, Emily Hand's father, he's an Irish Israeli. He thought his daughter was murdered, and for that brief moment that gave him some certainty knowing that his daughter was not being held hostage. And then a few days later, he learned that his daughter was alive, being held in such a nightmare. And we saw the photo of her, pale, terrified, afraid to talk out loud. We all felt her pain, and we would do anything we could to take it away. The good news is, a couple days later, there was a beautiful photo of her finding her strength back as she tries to process life. But there's something fascinating about her experience that's worth noting. When Emily was in captivity, she talked about how her relationship with her best friend Hilla and her mother, Raya, the mother. It's because of the mom, who I believe is still being held hostage. It's the mother who was able to give her that strength. So it's very similar to the Auschwitz-Birkenau story of maternal love bringing God's presence into the world. So for Emily Hand, the way she was able to survive this ordeal was through another woman in her life, being Raya, giving her that comfort. I don't want to call it certainty, but you know where I'm going. And here we are, and the war's back on. And many of you have asked me, what do we do as a Jewish community? What can we do? What are our next steps? In addition to our incredible philanthropic donations that are going towards the Israel campaign, in addition to advocating for Israel being proud, they want action items. And as I said last week, We're not ready yet to go on the offensive because we're still in the state of shock and we haven't been able to collectively mourn. But that doesn't mean we don't stop learning and figuring out what we're supposed to do when we will be called upon to respond to the greatest injustice against the Jewish people, the total collapse of, again, Western ideals and civilization. We have to be prepared. IDF will defeat Hamas in Gaza, and I am certain of that, at a great expense. They will win. But there's another problem that Israel faces and we face. And for us to get into this fight is for us to be more aware of what is against us. So after Hamas is defeated in Gaza, yes, I'm concerned more than ever about Hezbollah. Yes, Iran. But our concern, the spotlight, must be on Qatar. Qatar. Because right now in Qatar, 4 of Hamas's leadership are housed in the Ritz-Carlton, billionaires. And my concern is that once they know they'll lose Gaza, they know they're able to seize Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. 7 out of 10 Palestinians supported October 7th. 8 out of 10 Palestinians heavily support Hamas. There's a reason why Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, he's been president or chairman for 18 years in his first term of office, because if he were to hold elections, he would lose to the Speaker of the House, who is a member of the Hamas party. So for me, once the Gaza war is over, are we prepared what's going to happen in Judea and Samaria? Because people want to know, why are we facing so much Jew hatred abroad, on college campuses? Why is the United Nations and their gender violence absolutely silent regarding the gender-based violence against women, the rape in Israel? That, my friends, is Qatar. Qatar houses Al Jazeera, which is one of the worst forms of propaganda in the Arab world, adding gasoline to fire. It is Qatar who is heavily funding the Human Rights Watch, an organization that has been absolutely appalling toward Israel. It is Qatar who holds so many financial positions of grocery stores and businesses in Europe, hotels in this country, and here is why we have so much silence from universities: the amount of money the Qataris are putting into university endowments with the greatest PR firm in order for them to look good. Around 10 years ago, when FIFA, the World Cup, was going to tell us which country was going to host the World Cup, this is a big deal, huge economics, great for the country. I remember President Obama came in with a huge delegation. David Beckham with David Cameron came in with a huge declaration, and there was Qatar. Everyone knew that they were not going to get it. How could Qatar, a country that has legalized slave labor, how could they get the World Cup? They got it. The amount of people that were murdered from building these stadiums, it was the Qataris. The greatest gaslight that we are seeing. So if we want to respond, we have to turn the spotlight on the Qataris. It's okay. Second, I hope it's someone good. I'm just kidding. No Avi committed. We don't say for high holidays, I'll hit Shachatano for cell phones going off. I promise you. But for second, diasporic Jews, especially in this country, have got to have an honest conversation with ourselves. And during Yontif, I talked about the systematic agenda in this country to remove Jews from the public sector. We have less Jews holding office. We have less Jews being appointed to nonprofit boards, less Jews in corporate America. We know for a fact that more Jews got into universities during the quota system than Jews are getting in today, because there's a systematic agenda to remove Jews from the public center based on this idea that one who became successful must have oppressed someone else. This is the ideology. One who became successful, their success must came at the expense of oppressing others. They look at Jews post-1945, Jews who have celebrated meritocracy of working hard. They look at Israel, a country 75 years young, again through merit and skill of finding a way to be successful. This is the ideology that has been plaguing universities for a couple decades. And it's time that we as American Jews, we shed a spotlight on this and say, this is unacceptable. For the past week, my wife has been sending emails to me from the University of Michigan, Hillel. The students were on the verge of basically having a referendum. Do you like Jews or you do not like Jews? That was it. And due to some unethical computer breach, the university canceled the election. That's a shanda in itself. There's absolutely no way that such an election, such a vote should have ever taken place in the ivory tower. But why, we ask, why was University of Michigan, where was the faculty, where was the administration to allow such a vote to take place or an election? And keep in mind, this is the same university that employed Professor Leopold, who refused to write a letter of recommendation for a young woman to study in Israel. What happened to him? His sabbatical was delayed. So again, what are we going to do? University of Michigan has an $18.2 million budget towards diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. And we know through incredible data from focus groups, through foundations, that we know that diversity, equity, inclusion officers have a total obsession for Jews. This is part of the problem. So for us to go on the offensive, it requires us to look at who our friends are and those entities who are harming the Jewish people. If people want to know why we have such contemporary Jew hatred, it's all part of the horseshoe. Right wing, left wing, it's all in the middle. It's all making Jews the total other. 20 years from now, 30 years from now, we're going to look back and say, what do we do at this most pivotal moment in our lives? Do we go back to thinking that optics or social credit score are more important than our kin, than our people? And for me, as I judge myself and what I did at the worst moment in my Jewish history life, it's time we recognize the things that have been plaguing us. It's going to take Israel years to recover from this tragedy. And what they need more than ever is a diasporic Judaism, a diasporic Jewish community that isn't just Reform, conservative, Orthodox, Republican, Democrat. We're Jews. We were at that Sinai moment together. It is time for us to pivot. It is time for us to change ways, and it's going to be difficult. But if us to go on the offensive requires us to change our mindset. All of Israel is responsible for one another in order to fulfill the mitzvot. I want to make sure that my children, your great-grandchildren, grandchildren, our future generations have a formidable Judaism in diaspora for years to come. We are obligated, we are commanded to change. Shabbat Shalom.